Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel on Monday in Manchester. This is my new t-shirt from Peter Watson in Glasgow about having lots of books and having too many books to read ever. Thanks, Peter. Um, okay, catching up with the weekend. First thing to say is that Bernard Socks is well. He is all right. I'm going to move this up because now you've seen the t-shirt. Oops. There, I'm not going to crouch down. Right, first of all, Bernard is fine. On Friday, we realised he was not himself. He wasn't eating properly, and then we had to go away for the weekend. I had this convention I had to go to, so we got him to the vets or the hairdressers, as he knows it, on Friday afternoon, and they're brilliant. There are long-term vets in Levenshulme. We've gone to them for years and years, and they checked out everything. And he's a very, very healthy cat, a 15-year-old cat, more than 15 years old, and everything's very healthy. He's just a bit stressed out, and that's put him off his food. Clearly stressed out because of these visiting, interloping, invading cats that we seem to have coming in the garden and coming in the house as well, because they've worked out how to batter the cat flap. Even though it's a microchip cat flap, these cats still get in, and Socks has been quite stressed about it, more than we even thought. You wish that they could tell you exactly what was going on, but they can't. They try and let you know. Anyway, he's been fine. He's been eating better. We're going to get a new cat flap. It's on order, and Jeremy's picking it up today. So this is still too low. So he's going to be fine. So that's good news on the cat front. There might be hell on as Jeremy does some DIY this afternoon. If you hear noises, it'll be him attacking the back door with all of his tools. Hopefully, it'll work out. Right. Then we went away for the weekend when we knew Socks was going to be okay, and our friends were coming round to sit with him and feed him, look after him, and send us videos of his progress as he ate his food and became more vocal again. And we went to Bakewell in Derbyshire for the weekend with our friends Jamie and Kyle, where we had an Airbnb, and we had a fantastic time. We just had 2 days away, just slightly less than 2 days away, but it seemed like a holiday. It really is worth organising those weekends where you go and stay somewhere new or a bit familiar, but in a new place, and you explore and you bookshop and you go to the pub and you see friends, you make new friends. Being away for a bit like that is a complete tonic, I think. We've done it once this year so far before that, and that was in Whitby in January. We've been very lucky to get away. Nowhere exotic, but just perfect, perfect for us for now, this point in the year. Saturday, we were all in Sheffield because it was the Valiant Doctor Who convention, 1 day convention, run by Phantom Films. And I was one of the guests. I was there to talk about my books and my scripts and to do a talk, a conversation with Katie Manning. And it was a big reunion with lots of old friends, obviously including Katie, who's been a friend and a colleague for 25 years now. And just lots of people, lots of really interesting, lovely people. And the fans that come out to the Phantom Films conventions are always really sweet. It's like being part of one big family. It's not one of these Comic Con things where people queue for hours dressed up as things um, really hot and sweatily in some kind of conference, giant conference center somewhere, and they get 2 minutes and pay a fortune to have a photo taken. With somebody off the telly, it's not like that at all. It's a proper meeting of a big gang, and there's no hierarchy, there's no pecking order, there's no star system, so everybody mingles, and it's just so nice to see, all these people, to see Vernon Dobichev, who I'd never met, and he was so lovely. He's a proper old school actor who'd been in Doctor Who in the 60s, But he's been in every TV show and every film, and he arrived in a long coat and hat and sat down and asked Jeremy and I, "How long have you been together? Are you married?" in this very grand, lovely way. And he said, "I rejoice in your relationship, your 28 years, your freedom." And it was incredibly moving to talk to somebody from a different era, looking at us living our lives. Very friendly, just lovely. Yeah, lots and lots of lovely people, lots of stories, and a lovely dinner afterwards, and a drive through the misty fog back to Bakewell across the moors that night after just a very funny dinner out. Lovely people. Anyway, then some book shopping in Bakewell and Matlock, which is nearby and has junk shops and antique shops and bookshops. So that's the bit you're here for, I guess, really, after all this talks of cats and conventions and Doctor Who. Really, you want to hear about my book haul. I bought too many books in the shops, even though there weren't that many shops open and there wasn't that long spent book shopping. I still managed to find um, some wonderful things. So I'm going to go through them fairly, not fast. I've been talking for 6 minutes. You can hang around, can't you? You've got a while? Right. This came before we left. Animals. It's the love letters between Christopher Isherwood and Don Bachardy. Didn't even know this existed. Really happy that it does. It turned up just before we left. When was it published? It must be. All my lights have gone off. I don't know what the point is of those little lights. They last about a minute. Right, 10 years ago. We watched the documentary on Amazon Prime, and it's wonderful, wonderful. And I love their cartoons to each other and their kind of inner creative fantasy life as they communicated long distance when they were apart. Lots of letters. You just think in the future people won't have these. Stories of friendships and love affairs and families won't be told through collections of letters anymore because we've all, for whatever reason, for good or bad, moved to uh, electronic communications. And it's rare that you keep emails or that they get kept. Or, I mean, I do try and file away significant conversations just because I want to keep a record of these things. But, people won't be finding boxes of letters in the future, and it's such a shame. I think we've got to start some kind of campaign. I've got boxes everywhere in here, as you can see, filled with postcards and letters and diaries and all the things that writers always had, and I've tried to maintain that kind of life. But it's uh, I've kept things, which means your house is full. But never mind. Right, the first bookshop we found was a nice one in Matlock. Where everything was slightly underpriced, which is great. But the woman didn't look entirely happy to be working in a bookshop on a Sunday. She seemed mystified by the whole thing, which I didn't understand. Anyway, I got an Alice Thomas Ellis trilogy. Now, my friend Wayne, who's a voracious reader and he loves slim, bitter books by slightly older ladies, that's his genre. He loves Sheena Mackay and Beryl Bainbridge and Bernice Rubin, and most of all, he loves Alice Thomas Ellis, who was Anna Haycroft in real life, and she was the wife of Beryl Bainbridge's publisher and her best friend. Another kind of smoking, demon-eyed watcher of human nature. I never met her. I did meet Beryl a few times. Uh, and I've always meant to read Alice Thomas Ellis. I think all I've read is her books on food and cookery. But this trilogy looks interesting. And they had the whole lot for £1 each, which is ridiculous. The clothes in the wardrobe. The skeleton in the cupboard. And the fly in the ointment. They're great titles. Lily always introduces danger and excitement into the humdrum lives of her friends. It's something of a mission. She is exotic, with a contempt for the commonplace and a terrible need to be loved. When she and her husband Robert stay with Monica, an old school friend, Lily is ruled by her most rebellious instincts. You can see it's going to be trouble in store. Yep. It's all people behaving badly, basically. Middle class, um, repressed people coming unstuck, which is great, great genre. They also have a little corner of pulp science fiction, which I know you love hearing about. If my statistics on YouTube mean anything, this is the non-statistical man, which I'd never heard of, and Jamie, who was buying a pile of Pulp Fiction. Yeah, Raymond F. Jones. He said they were. It's a famous book and it was filmed, but I'd never heard of it. I just love the cover. I don't love the tiny print. Um, and it's was published by, obviously, Belmont Science Fiction, which is vaguely familiar, but it's not Ace and it's not Del Rey, and those are the ones I know from that time, the 60s and 70s, and I know that everything that they published was interesting. The list of people that they published is amazing. Clifford Simak, James Blish, Lester Del Rey, Damon Knight, Poul Anderson, Robert Silverberg. Um, these are all people who turn up in every anthology you get from that era. They make me think of libraries when I was a child. And this is the future as seen by a slightly older generation from the 60s who wrote these mad psychedelic novels. So that's to look forward to. A scholastic mystery book with one of those gorgeous covers. Look at the little dog. He looks like he's about to be eaten by the crocodile. I've read the first chapter of this and it's very atmospheric. The Mystery of the Great Swamp by Marjorie A. Zapf, which sounds made up, but I don't think it is. It's a swampy tale of the South. I love these scholastic books, the American ones and the British ones, but the American ones are always mysteries and they're always beautifully written, all the way through those 60s, 70s, 80s years. Um, I didn't realize at the time, I suppose, how well kids' books were put together back then. I do now as I look around at the things that are published now, but I'll go on about that at length later. Here's one from the early 90s, Here I Am, Russell Stannard. Now, he is a physicist who wrote some kids' books for Faber, which kind of gives me pause for thought because Faber always seems a bit worthy, a bit literary, and their kids' books were always so stiff and telling you something. And this seems the worst of the lot in a way, in the sense that he wants to teach you about physics and philosophy and God. And this is about a computer that starts talking to a child and asks the big questions. The child gets to ask the big questions about life, the universe, and whatever. It's nicely illustrated. Jonathan Pugh, whose pictures are vaguely familiar. Look at that. Anyway, it seems nicely written. So even though it seems a bit worthy, I still think it's worth a look at. Sorry, I keep leaning into the camera. Jamie, when we arrived in Bakewell and all met up in the Airbnb, had found another issue of Starblazer, a comic he loved and that I loved. We're 10 years apart in age, so he got the end of this series. It ran for about 10 or 12 years. And there were DC Thompson publishing science fiction, hoping to rival 2000 AD. But they always seemed a bit more old-fashioned in the way that Scott's things always did. That sounds terrible. It's like science fiction by way of the Bruins and the Dandy. And they seem to belong to the 1930s somehow. Anyway, look at these drawings. Look at that shmoo thing on a flying saucer, or a really fat Mekon. They're really collectible. And I bought a pile of them at Cromford Collector's Corner. The last time I was there, we didn't get to go there this time, but I have requested a mystery package from Ian at Cromford Collector's Corner. We might be talking about that in a day or so, a few days. I bought a pile of these then, having been reminded of them. And Jamie gave me a set that he'd had for years and years. He'd read them almost into obliteration. They'd been read so much. Really lovely. Lovely things to read. And they were complete in themselves in one issue, which is a really good idea when you think about it. The thing about stuff like 2000 AD or Eagle or those Kids comics of that time was that you had to, you bought one, you latched onto the stories, and you had to keep buying, which is what they wanted you to do, of course. And these, they were complete in themselves. Although apparently this detective character in a kind of weird future of robots and stuff, recurred, came back. Now this is good. The Wily Wizard and the Wicked Witch and Other Weird Stories by Godfried Bomans. This is a Dutch book in translation, published by Dent Dolphins, which I forgot about. I just read the first of these stories this morning, and it's absolutely smashing. If I wasn't overrunning in time, I'd read some to you. Maybe I'll do some. I'll dip into this at some other point. But the drawings and everything are gorgeous. There's a kind of naughty sense of humour. It's that kind of almost like Roald Dahl sense of humour about witches and wizards behaving badly. That kind of feel to it. What else? A couple of novels. Anne Beattie, Falling in Place. I read her years ago and was reminded suddenly when this fell into my hand in a shop. I Should Have Been a Hornby Train by Pat Arrowsmith, which is a lesbian memoir published in the 80s, but looking back at the 30s, it's published by the Gay Men's Press from the 80s. Now, that's something I want to talk about at some point, the importance of the Gay Men's Press and what those books meant, and the possibility of kind of collecting them back up now. Almost like restoring a missing part of, for me anyway, a missing part of gay literary history. Wildwood by Jan Needle. This is a reprint, and I don't know who reprinted this. My copy is somewhere and all the pages have fallen out. This is by Golden Duck. It was first published by Andre Deutsch. Now, this book, if people don't know it, and you should know it, and it should be in print, mass market, it should be available as a modern classic. It's a retelling of The Wind in the Willows. And Jan Needle looks at The Wind in the Willows and goes, it's all poshos. All those characters were middle class, upper class. And he does a kind of Marxist retelling from the point of view of the weasels and the creatures of the wild woods, the commoners, who are so roundly trounced and denounced in the original Wind in the Willows. And he kind of restores the balance. It's done really well. It's very, very witty, and it makes you think about your assumptions about who gets to be the heroes of stories, who gets to be the heroes of children's stories. Right, almost done. I did want to spend longer on these because these are the real magic that I found, the real new things that I didn't know about. Well, I knew about this because everyone knows about Bunty, the girls' comic of the past in the 70s and 80s. I was aware of it, of course, being a boy in the town I grew up. You never read girls' comics. You'd be beaten to a pulp. You had to pretend to like stuff about war and football, which was dreadful. I always knew, and various people have told me since, of course, as well, that the girls' comics, Bunty and Tammy and the rest of them, had the best stories. Misty. They had spooky stories, science fiction, historical, every kind of story in comic strip form and prose. And in recent years, I've I've read these, and it's like, oh God, they were great. So whenever I see Bunty or any of these things, I either buy them for myself or for friends. Again, as if you're rescuing them from these charity shops, from oblivion. The kind of books that people wouldn't make for kids now, the print being too small, the text being too dense, too advanced perhaps. You look at annuals nowadays and they're just unbelievably simplistic and undemanding, and people deny that's true. But you look at something like the Doctor Who annual and how that's changed, and kids would have sneered at what they do. Kids of the past would have been amazed and sneered at what they do now. I think they're just too undemanding, I think is the word. Now, Tony and the Watering Can, the Magic Watering Can by Harold Chapman, illustrated by Clayton Hoyle and Peter Edwards, 1978. Now here's a picture book with quite a lot of text, kind of an unusual amount of text, I would think, and some really sophisticated storytelling via pictures. It's quite a simple tale about a boy who gardens for his grandparents, and it's got these amazing, wonderful, saturated illustrations. It's about vegetables in the garden, all being like the Munch Bunch, stuff like that. And being in a war with flies and slugs. The slugs look like tanks. And there's a celebration and a parade and a very, very diva-ish lettuce that sings. They're very camp illustrations, really, but something clever about the whole book. And when I looked, there he is with a magic watering can. When I looked up about this, the publisher was a small one based in Fitzrovia, long gone now, and they didn't publish. They had cookery books, things like the Pyrex Cookery Book, 1978, which is very intriguing, but not many kids' books. I couldn't see any others, and the author and illustrators of this didn't do any more. But look at the perspective on that, the kid looking out the window down at the play park. It's so clever, so well done. And it reminds me again of the kids' book that I've never found again, the one that I saw in the early 70s, the psychedelic one that I saw in a department store in South Shields that was all pink and purple and orange and swirly and magical, and I've never seen it again. Don't know what it's called, don't know who it was by, but there's a hint of it in that. It's the book that I'm endlessly looking for. This is a fantastic picture book. This is the last in my set today. I might even read some of this at some point, but not just now. The Giant Jam Sandwich. Story and pictures by John Vernon Lord with verses by Janet Burroway. It's a really gorgeous picture book, but I'm already over time. I don't want to make these videos too long. I will see you soon in another video. Press like and subscribe and all that stuff, and take care. Okay, goodbye.